And hi everyone, welcome to eLearnChat, where you always learn something new. And today we've got with us my good friend and co-host, Lesley Price. In fact, you're going to be able to see Lesley and I together at the Learning Technologies Conference and Expo. This is February 13th through 14th, London, England. Come join us. You'll have a great time.
We can't wait to welcome you. We can't wait to welcome you.
No, we'll have a good time with you, and we're going to be at the LearnAppeal stand. I almost said booth. It's a booth for us. It's a stand for you. We'll stand in the booth for you. How's that? Anyway, we will be there. Come join us. It's fun. Learn about the charity. Learn about what they're doing. You'll have a great time learning about it. And also come to the show. It's a wonderful show. It'll be a great time. My first time in London ever. I've almost made it to London, but not quite. So this will be good.
Wow.
It'll be an exciting trip. And Lesley, this should be a lot of fun. Are you all ready?
Oh yeah, it's normally a fantastic event. You won't be the only American there.
No.
We have lots of Americans come over to speak and also to attend the event. So I'll be meeting up with some old in inverted commas friends, long-term friends.
That sounds great. All right, let's get going. And we are back, and with us today is Mark Simon. You all remember Mike. He's been on the Mark. He's been on the show many times before. He's a good friend. He does a lot of work in the e-learning space, and he mentioned pre-show right before we started augmented reality. So that's going to be sort of interesting. How you doing, Mark?
Great. Thanks so much for having me here, Rick, once again. Great to be here.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. So what have you been up to? I know you've always been into different tools and doing things. You've worked with iSpring for many years. You've worked with a lot of other tools. What is on Mark's horizon?
Yeah, so I've been very busy. Let's see, my business in general still is consulting with a variety of different clients around the Boston area, mostly around the Boston area. Lately, been working with pharmaceutical companies. Just it seems to be a real booming business still in the United States. So Vertex Pharmaceutical right now. I'm just finishing up a project at AbbVie Pharmaceutical, and just starting a project at Tesaro, and doing a variety of different e-learning things. And then on the side, I've been looking into different tools. I just finished an evaluation of the three major PowerPoint-based e-learning tools, and wrote another article, kind of a follow-up to the one that I wrote several years ago for Learning Solutions magazine. It's always interesting to check in to see what stage each one of them are at. So that was kind of interesting, and you can see that on eLearning Industry website. That's Chris Pappas's website.
So what are the three top PowerPoint tools? Are they the same still? Any newcomers?
The one that dropped off the list from before was Travanis. They had Lectura Snap, and
right.
That one kind of faded away. It never quite made it to that next level to try to keep up with the different features that the others had. But of course, Articulate, is still in there. I think they're, in my opinion, the second place tool out there. They've got a lot of good capability now within the Articulate 360 suite, and their PowerPoint tool does, benefit from that, although it doesn't have quite the same features that iSpring does. And I think anybody that knows me knows that I really am a fan of iSpring, and so that was another tool, PowerPoint-based tool that I evaluated. And then Adobe Presenter was also in the mix as well. And Adobe Presenter was a little bit of a disappointment. I don't know if they're ready for another upgrade, but they still have a lot of remnants of Flash in there. It was real difficult to install it because it told me I had to upgrade my Flash on my Windows machine, and I don't like the idea of upgrading Flash, of course, especially nowadays. But yeah, those were the three. So Articulate, iSpring, and then also Adobe all have PowerPoint-based tools.
And it's,
have you come across an organization? I don't know if you come across them at all. They're a British research organization. They used to be called eLearnity. They're now called Fosway. And they do something called the 9 Grid. And what they do is look at all different kinds of tools, loads of different kinds of tools. And it's quite, some of the things they're doing are really interesting with it. And what I like about Fosway is that included in what they do, they talk about something called the total cost of ownership. So it's not just the buying the license for the tool that costs you money. It's all the training, all the prep, everything else that goes in to owning that particular tool.
ooh,
And I did that. I used to, when I was working, I used to advise government, and that was something that we talked about. Used to be, you know, when an organization is implementing a system, and whether that be in a school or whether it be in a college or whether it be in a business, you can't just look at the technology. You've got to look at the total cost of ownership.
Totally agree with that. There's many aspects to owning the tool, including, you know, the frustration factor of working with the tool and then having it be reliable and responsive for you, let alone if I have a problem, I have to call customer support and things like that. So I've never heard of Fosway, but I'd be happy to look them up. It's F-O-S-W-A-Y?
F-O-S-W-A-Y. F-O-S-W-A-Y. Fosway.
Great.
And they are,
Great.
they're a very good research organization. I say I've known the people that are in it quite a long time, and I can guarantee that the work that they do is thorough. And one of the things they do is actually look at tools, all different kinds of tools.
Sure.
So not just I'm just looking at their website here, but they do I'm just looking at all the different things: cloud, HCM, integrated talent management, learning systems, digital management, lots of different kinds of, you know, things that they look at.
I would love to see them. So I follow here in the States. Diane Elkins runs eLearning Uncovered, or she's written quite a few books under the eLearning Uncovered label. Yeah. And she tends to be, to me, like the most objective and the most maybe reliable resource that I've found for telling me which tools she prefers and why. And it tends to be pretty pragmatic. Joe Ganchi is another one who really is very knowledgeable with all the tools. But of course, his background was, before he was eLearning Joe, he was Captivate Joe, and I know he likes the Adobe tools, certainly I think a little bit more, and he has this tie-in, I guess, not really a tie-in because he's very careful about not, you know, tying himself in too tightly, but. Yeah, I always feel like he's a little bit more leaning toward Captivate, you know, as opposed to some of the other tools.
Wow!
But I mean, it certainly would be worth your while. It would be worth your while looking up to see the kind of research that that Fosway do.
Right. That's great. Yep.
So,
well, thank you
Mark,
for that.
And Mark, after all these years, what are you finding in terms of e-learning popularity versus what it was before? We're finding that it's not as popular, though it's still popular. Are you finding same things?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I don't know who invented the term micro-learning. I think Grovo is taking credit for it. They're a learning management system company out of New York City. And certainly they were one of the companies to basically put it out there and make sure that everybody understood it. But yeah, I think the modern learner in general is learning much differently in the workplace. They're also learning much differently in K through 12 or the elementary schools or secondary schools. So yeah, the e-learning itself and the learning management system itself, okay, both of those kind of tie in together, is becoming much different, you know, and people are much more apt to try to find short bursts of information. You know, I think the training classes now are becoming shorter and shorter. And when I build instructor-led training, I'm more trying to build a course that shows people where to find information instead of telling them the information.
You know, that's a really good point. That's actually a key point, because that seems to be the way people are learning now. They're used to searching Google. They're used to going out and finding things, and they don't really want to sit there and be bored for 45 minutes or an hour in a classroom. A little different.
They're also used to finding rubbish, and they're also very used. I mean, the number of times on Facebook when people put up posts saying, "Do not copy and paste, share, or do copy this, or do this," and then I put up www.snopes.com. Check it out. Is it a scam?
Except Snopes.
99.9% of the time, it's a scam.
Yep. The problem with Snopes is that they're a scam too, as everybody's found out. They're not very legit. But anyway, aside from that,
whatever. You know, if people did a little bit of checking, then they would actually maybe work out. Because I think information skills now is something that we don't tend to teach people. We make the assumption that they know how to search the internet, that they know how to identify what is right on Google, what is not right, what is a scam, what is not a scam. And information skills is actually a skill in itself. Because, you know, as my first boss told me, to assume makes an ass out of you and me.
Absolutely. Yes. No, and I
don't know if you find that too, Mark.
No, I agree with that as well. So I think one of the things that we're doing now is we're saying, oh, well, we can't do training the way we used to because of the millennials. And I think that's actually a little short-sighted. I think the whole world is learning differently. I think the whole world is using the internet. And because of the way that we are finding information and getting information for ourselves in general is changing the way that we learn in the workplace. So it may have started with the millennials, but certainly it's gone beyond that at this point. And I think because of the internet and a variety of different ways that we've taught ourselves topics or information, you know, I think again in the workplace it's changing for everyone.
Maybe we've also got to teach them how to search properly. Maybe we've got to, one of the things we should be doing as learning and development people is actually, you know, like, you know, teach them how to do it. As you would say in Scotland, learn them.
Okay. I like that term. Sure. That sounds like a little southern phrase maybe from the United States side, but yeah, learn them. Let them learn.
Learn them.
Somehow.
Yeah.
Yep.
I like the other one you have.
Yeah.
Lesley, that'll learn you.
That'll learn you.
I like that one.
And that's a very Scottish thing. So it wouldn't, when you were a child in Scotland, if you were going to touch something and you got your hand burnt, or you got something, you get your fingers stuck in a drawer, your parents wouldn't say that'll teach you. The expression was, that'll learn you. That'll learn you. And if you think about it, it actually does make sense.
Yeah, maybe not grammatically, but yes.
No, but,
I think you're right.
In terms of the word, rather than teaching, people are learning for themselves.
Yes, correct. Yeah, and however you say it, I'm sure people will understand it. So it's just if you're writing, you have to be a little bit more careful with how you.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I know. But
now,
that's
Mark,
that's a Scottish phraseology.
Yeah. Now, Mark, when you do your training and development, Are you finding that more and more training is becoming blended? It's not just e-learning or even stand-up. It's a combination of so many different things. What's your experience been in that?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I'll be speaking at the end of March there's an ATD, the Association for Training and Talent Development. I always forget the name, but there's an ATD New England conference at the end of March, and the theme is blended learning. So good segue to your question. I'm going to be presenting on how to estimate a blended learning solution. So in other words, somebody says, okay, I want a blended learning solution that includes an instructor-led class, very brief, maybe 2 hours, 4 hours, whatever it is, and then I'm going to want a formal e-learning course, and then we're going to follow it up with some webinar and some documentation or job aids and things like that. That's so typical nowadays, just because, again, I think if you start off with that instructor-led class, which, by the way, I still like instructor-led classes and face-to-face, eye-to-eye contact and that sort of thing. But it basically, I think now the objective should be to show people where other information is and where to get your information when you're ready for that particular task or when you're ready for that particular job. So I have a tool that I use that it allows you to get a quick estimate of either instructor-led training development or e-learning development or documentation, job aid development, and things like that.
No, that's good.
So thanks for leading up to that plug, I guess.
No, you're welcome. But so what are you finding is the blend that most people are doing more of? Is it more instructor-led? Is it more digital or e-learning? What are you seeing as the kind of that balance between the two?
So this will sound kind of silly, but I'm developing a lot of cartoons now. I'm doing actually a variety of different things, but for the audience that I have at Vertex specifically, I'm working in a patient services group. And it's a great group of people that just talk on phones to these patients that are really not in great shape. And they talk to them, and they talk to the doctor's offices, and they talk to the pharmacies and things like that. And then for helping them and training them, there's, of course, all the recorded calls. So what we did to try to help them and teach others in the company, what the patients are going through and how to help the patients, and what, a variety of different lessons that you can learn from listening into a call, that the listening part just wasn't enough. And now there's tools out there. You probably know the old Go Animate tool is now called Viens. And ultimately, we experimented around with a few different things, including podcasts, coming out with an MP3, and basically listening to the call. And for auditory learners, that worked. For a lot of other people, it didn't. And so we kind of started morphing into, well, let's do a PowerPoint then and have some pop-ups with the MP3 behind the scenes. And then we started doing the cartoons. And they love the cartoons, and they walk away with more information, and I really think they're retaining more information. And even for software simulations, which every once in a while, everyone's got a tool, whatever the tool is, Salesforce.com or whatever else internal tools that you're using. And typically I used to use Captivate a lot, to kind of do the show and tell, or now Articulate has actually an excellent tool, and so does iSpring. To do the recordings. Camtasia has it too, by the way. But if you have a little cartoon character with just screenshots behind, that's another thing that I'm kind of experimenting with now, is just to kind of like have some sort of ability to make the e-learning come to life. And so somebody can follow it and maybe have a little character involved. And again, it comes down to a screenshot that I put in to Viens, and then they have all kinds of different characters. They can do all kinds of different actions, and that seems to be working as well. So
that's pretty good. Viens a nice tool. It's fun, and it is pretty effective.
It is fun. Yeah, my wife and my kids can't believe I actually do cartoons for a living. and people paying me for doing it. I catch a lot of grief about that, but no, it is effective, I find, because again, these lessons don't go on for 2 hours at a time or an hour at a time. You know, the online lessons now, you fragment them and you piece them together. So you know, at the most you've got like a little 10-minute lesson, 15-minute lesson, let's say, something like that. And so, you know, it's easy enough to put together a little segment like that and make it very engaging and very, I guess, just interesting and hopefully effective at some point.
Do you think that, you know, to ask, you're talking about things being shorter, do you think people's attention span being shorter for learning, that seems to be happening, you know, not just in learning, it seems to be happening across the board, that people's attention span, you know, isn't as long as it used to be. And I wonder how that actually then affects things like client services and dealing with customers. And if you're on a sales team, or you're doing stuff, or you're at, you know, you're at C-suite, senior management level, and there's actually some very important board discussions going on, and you suddenly, which really do need people listening to, and for longer than 10 minutes, and yet you get people sort of start raising their eyebrows and not paying attention. I wonder if that has any impact. Do you think it has any impact on the way then businesses are run?
Well, yeah, and you bring up a great point, Lesley, because I do think the attention spans are lessening, if you want to look at it that way. But I think that's a little deceptive. Okay, so I need to do more research on this, I guess, and you know, given the fact that I used to teach at college level, I should be able to dig in a little bit deeper. But of course, my attention span's pretty crappy too. But here's the thing: people still are at their device, PC, Mac, whatever, for long periods of time. So I don't think people don't have the patience to sit down for an hour to learn something. I just think they like to jump from one thing to another. Like, they just don't want to start a lesson that's going to go on for 45 minutes or an hour. But you show them, okay, here's 3 different lessons that are all going to be 15 minutes, and it's going to point you in different directions to find information. I think that's the solution that you want. I think people will still be able to learn topics deeply, and certainly we can assess that, you know, to make sure that people, before they go into surgery, that they really do know what they're doing. But, you know, again, I think the attention span being less just means we have to kind of approach it a little bit differently. I think you can still offer a curriculum to someone that is comprehensive. But again, I think building in chunks is a little bit more effective.
Except if you're going to be a surgeon and you're going to be doing the job for, you know, you're in there for 5 hours doing that job, focused, attention. Your attention span can't go. So how do people practice that?
Sure.
Ooh.
Hopefully that's their job, you know, but again, there's one thing, we're talking about learning here to do their job. I think actually doing the job, I think people know that I have to have a little bit more patience for this.
But if you're going
like
to
if a
learn,
pilot's landing a plane.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you're going to learn to be a surgeon, you know, you've got to learn somewhere, and your attention span can't be just 10 minutes.
Of course, Lesley, on the other hand, if you look at surgeons, engineers, scientists, they tend to have longer attention spans, just by nature.
Yeah.
So you don't want a surgeon who's got ADHD. That would be pretty scary, actually. So, and most of the ones I've met who are surgeons, they tend to be very calm, peaceful. They have to be. Pilots are pretty dead usually because they have to be. If you have an emergency, you can't overreact. You have to react just exactly the right way, or those planes break up in the air. So it's kind of interesting because people do have shorter attention spans. I don't know if a lot of it is chemical, foods we eat, processing, environment, whatever, but there definitely is a lot of that. But then look at also how they're taught and everything that they're put with. You've got the electronics everywhere, nonstop noise, nonstop video, nonstop. So they have a tendency to just constantly be stimulated. And it's hard to get them out of that stimulated mode to get them to learn. That could be part of the problem. We overstimulate the kids, never give them a chance to just sit and rest. And then when they rest, they fall asleep because they're that tired. So there's a little bit of that going on with the younger ones, that as they get older, they still keep trying to be stimulated. And at one point, you've got to say, okay, not everything in life is a stim. You got to sit down and learn something too. So that's a tricky one, that balancing act of what they're culturally taught versus what they're actually doing in life. Sort of interesting.
Are you noticing this, Mark, at all? With different age groups
sure.
that you work with?
Yeah, and you know, it's funny because it does hit home even. So my daughter's a doctor. She's a pediatrician, and she went through the medical school. And so I would talk to her often about, you know, okay, so how did you learn this and what did you do and those sort of things. And she's still learning on the job. And so I'm always interested when she comes back from like a training session or whatever. Okay, well, what did they do and how did they teach you? It is a little bit different depending on your discipline. And you do need to have those maybe elongated lessons, because you can't teach somebody, you know, how to do diagnosis on a patient that's got a certain ailment unless you really go into all of the different permutations of it and possibilities. And I think that, you know, depending on the situation, I think somebody can't sit down and learn that way. But again, I think our general tendencies is to learn more things in chunks. You know, so for on-the-job training, to learn something a little bit new, or to learn a software program or an application or new technology, I think people tend to, you know, learn 20% of it, and then they'll learn the rest of the 80% later when they need it, that sort of thing. So
almost like just-in-time learning. Yeah, so almost like we're talking about, like just-in-time learning. So
sure,
you're a bit like, I may not know all of that now, but I know a man who does, or a woman who does, and I know where I can go and look.
Absolutely. So one of the first things that I do for my clients is I try to ask them, okay, so what sort of platforms do you have here that we can utilize? You know, I know a lot about SharePoint because sometimes that's the place to store things, and that's a place to point people to. Or if I do a job aid, the job aid will have a bunch of lists of different things on it where there are all the resources with links over, and they'll just have to look at the resource list and say, okay, this is what I need, and they'll click on it and it'll show up. So very important.
Well, we are just about out of time, and Mark, as always, it's a pleasure having you on. So what events are you doing? You're doing an ATD event coming in March, right?
Yes, ATD New England is in March, and then I think I'm going to be going, I'm still working it out. There's a conference called L10. It's basically one that is for the life sciences industry, training in the life science industries, and that'll be in Dallas in June. Still waiting to get approval because to present on behalf of a pharmaceutical company, there's a lot of sensitive information, so we're still trying to work that one out. Those are the two that are on the right now. Well,
great. Well, we look forward to seeing you next time on the show. And Lesley, I look forward to seeing you in less than 2 weeks, about 2 weeks.
Yes, but I'll see you next week anyway.
Yep, coming fast, and we'll see you next week on the show. All you people watching, thanks for being here. Please subscribe. We'll have Mark's information below so you can go check out his site and find out what Mark does. He does a good job. Anyway, we'll see you guys next week on eLearnChat. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
And we are done. That was good.